Hey guys, Daryl here. Saturday morning, putting together a whole bunch of Zens for round one, and I thought maybe I would show you guys what it takes to put one of these together, because I know you're all dying to get it, and why not torture you a little bit more? So what I do is I grab a bunch of cases. In this case, we're going to put black 3x6 together. Basically three parts: the case, the PCB, and the base plate. PCBs are all nicely wrapped. I've taken them out of the bag twice already, once to test all the sockets and once to put the screen and the battery and test the firmware on. So this is the third time handling the PCBs already. Essentially they are completely assembled, ready to go inside the keyboard. All I have to do is take the protective covers off the screens. Oops, there's nothing holding the batteries in right now, so that's one of the weird things about people who just ordered PCBs will notice they're flopping around. And then plop it in the case. So first thing I do is snap some of these things off, get rid of the tracks that help the installation, or sorry, the assembly in the factory. And then I get under this little tab. Actually, the first probably 5 or 6 I put together, I completely forgot to remove this protective coating, and I had to open them back up again and put them in. This is a pretty tight fit. But it fits really nice and snug, so this actually would not fall out if you turned it upside down, so that's kind of neat. Make sure that the screen is aligned. Now in a lot of this one's kind of odd, because normally I leave a black screen on it. Let's see if I have another one here. Oh yeah, here's one. So if you turn it off at the right time, the screen is black, and that helps me align it inside the case properly so that there's no gaps. So in this case, what I'm going to have to do is just flip it on and off for a second so I get a black screen. Shows me where the boundaries of the displayable area is. And now you can, I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but there's a little bit of a hint of a white track along there. So what I'm going to do is just grab my rubber glove that I'm not wearing today because there's not much that can get fingerprints on it, and I just slide it over a little bit. There's adhesive on the keyboard that kind of keeps it in place, but it's a non-permanent bond. It just kind of keeps it in place while I'm assembling it, and there we go. So now that screen is like pretty much perfectly centered inside of that recess, so that, I mean, you're not gonna actually receive two different types of screens. One that had a black line around the perimeter of the screen, and you don't even notice alignment issues with those, but these particular ones did have or is white from edge to edge, and when there's a black screen on a dark keyboard, you actually see that gap. So anyways, another thing I'm just trying to eliminate. So now I turn it on, make sure that I saw a flash of blue, make sure that the battery connected properly, and all right, so that one's good. This one I have to remove the protective coating again, and again, let's make a black screen so that I can ensure that I can have it properly aligned. And then I pop it in. And actually, the sound you hear when it's clicking in is actually the remaining bits of the mouse bites along the edge of the PCB. So it's not actually the PCB rubbing against the case, but the little bit of bumpy material left from the mouse bites. So that's kind of neat that it's actually floating inside. So, all right, so that's in. So now the next part is to get the base plates ready. This is by far the most annoying part of it all, because they all came individually wrapped and this plastic is terrible. It doesn't just separate. So I've got to, I'm on a self-healing mat here so that I can do this. But I trim close to the edge so that it's easy to peel off, and then I just kind of open the bottom edge here. And peel off the top coating. I leave the bottom coating on because this shiny polycarbonate is pretty fingerprint friendly, meaning it takes fingerprints like crazy. So I am not going to touch that before it goes into a case. So you will be the first person putting a fingerprint on it. Just another quality piece that you get from Low Pro KB. Commercial over. So yeah, this, like I said, this is the most time-consuming part of the whole build because it's super annoying to have to peel all of these individually. And if I don't cut the edges here, you can see how it's kind of binding right here. It gets really bad and stringy if I leave too much around the edge. So that's why I'm handling it the way I am. All right. So now I align the base plate with the and for those of you who maybe have to assemble this on your own, either because you bought PCBs in a case later, or you know, have to replace the battery, God forbid, or whatever. The wires here for the battery, there is a recess here to allow them not to get crunched when you put the top case down, but they have to be nicely kind of folded up in the area that you see it now, right kind of between the socket and the battery and the jack. If it's down below, it's going to get pinched by this bolt here, and if it's over top of these the fuel gauge here and other passives around it, that'll actually probably crunch between the gauge and the wires or the case. So yeah, make sure it's kind of nicely pressed up and that they are not on top of each other, and that they're lying nicely down, and you shouldn't have a problem. If at any time, let's say you drop your Zen on the floor or something and it doesn't turn on anymore, chances are that this connector came a little bit loose. This seems to be fairly finicky. It does pop in, but it doesn't. It seems to be easily dislodged, and I find that when this battery is not connected to anything and it flops out or something, that once in a while that causes this connection to be kind of undone. All you have to do is kind of press it back down. There's two little contacts in the front that make contact with the adapter, and anyways, that should that should resolve itself pretty quickly. But as long as you don't get a kind of foggy image, because when it turns off it gets kind of foggy, then you're good, and it's good to go. So I pop this in. I start from the top, make sure that the RF window where the magic wireless junk gets sent out to your computer is in first. Make sure all the plastic is out from around the edge. Pop this in, go around to the bottom, make sure this side is popped in. Some of the sprues from the injection molding were on this side and this side, so I start with those sides so that they're in first, so that the side without the little bumps left over from the sprues are not preventing it from shutting properly. And then usually the last corner I do is at the top here, and that's all in. And then I do the same with the second one. Make sure it's lined up. If it's not lined up, tolerances are pretty tight on this thing. Not only between the case and the base plate, but also between the components inside and the base plate. So yeah, make sure it's all nicely lined up before you start forcing it. Some pressure can be put if you put it right on the edge. This case is pretty thin, or the base plate is pretty thin. So you don't want to be, especially over like the battery and the MCU, you don't want to be pressing really hard there when putting the case together, because there's a chance of tearing of the material there. Pushing on the edges, there's lots of material and you won't have to worry about that. Alright, so then the only thing left is the screws and the bump-ons. So I peel back the coating a little bit, and here you get to see how shiny the base plate is. Get my handy dandy electric screwdriver, which I killed last night and forgot to charge, so it's plugged in and charging right now. And I screw in the screws. And whoops, don't want to get the plastic caught in there. And then I fold this back down. So I keep the plastic on it until it's done handling, and when my slave labor in the next room puts it all together in the boxes, they peel the coating off before they slide it in the case, so it's fingerprint free when it gets to you. I get my sheet of bump-ons out, put it in place, and then I press it down when the plastic's over it so that no fingerprints on it. When it gets pressed down, it becomes almost transparent to the point where it acts like a magnifying glass through what's on the back side, so that's kind of neat. And then I do the next one. Oops. So yeah, like I said, in the evenings after work, I have a day job in case anyone didn't realize that. After work and after dinner, I come down here, and this is my wood shop, and I've kind of repurposed for a keyboard assembly line. I can get about 10 to 12 done a night after dinner. Like today on Saturday, I can probably get, I don't know, probably close to 50 or 60 done today. So 100 or so over the weekend. Obviously it goes faster when I'm not trying to describe what I'm doing and you know, doing the camera friendly stuff, but for the most part it takes about I don't know, 5 minutes or so to get one completely assembled and in the shipping box. And then I get another bump on or two. Bump-ons are funny because you can, if I get a fingerprint on the bottom of the adhesive, you can actually see that when it gets pressed down because they're clear. So I'm touching it with a knife, and hopefully you'll never notice that. Okay, so that's one. Next one. Every time I reach for a screw, I bump the tripod. So the hex head on these screws is recessed so that it's completely below the surface, so that there's no sticking up of the heads. And also it's a very small hex head, I think 1.2 or 1.3 millimeter hex head for that, or you'll need an Allen key or a hex wrench for that. I had a supplier that I was going to send a hex wrench along with every order, but they didn't have the quantity I needed, and it just kind of fell through and never looked into it again. But they're available. I think even Amazon has some if you want it quick. But yeah, if you have plans to take it apart, that's going to be the only way that you're going to get in there, because a screwdriver or even Torx won't fit in. Well, Torx might work if you have the right size, but it's kind of rough on the bolt, so recommend getting a hex key if you want to get in there. And then once this is assembled, I just double check to make sure that the halves pair together properly, and that when it's plugged in, that the battery charges and that all the LEDs light up correctly still. and that I didn't pinch the battery wire or something like that. And then once that's done, it's ready to get put in a shipping box. I'll show you that in 1 second. Oops, this one's not turned on, so we'll just turn on. So the power switch and the reset button are kind of recessed so that they are easy to, or so they're not easy to see when the keyboard's lying flat. You have to, with this, you either need a bit of a fingernail, or I always use my pliers. For the reset button, if I hold my finger like this, I can hit it with my nail, no problem, and it resets quite easily. So these are paired successfully. Right now what you see here is on this side, this says, so this is what's called the peripheral side, or the right side, and this is the central side. The central side connects to your computer, and right now what this is saying is it's advertising, the Wi-Fi symbol next to the Bluetooth, it's advertising for a connection on channel 1. You have 5 channels that you can connect to 5 different devices with if you want, stock out of the box. You could add more if you needed more than 5. So anyways, this is saying it's advertising right now, so if I was to turn on my laptop and go to the Bluetooth settings, it would actually show a Corne-ish Zen advertising to be connected to. This side says Bluetooth is connected, so the 2 little arrows inside the Bluetooth symbol show that it's connected. And there's only a check mark or an X mark depending on whether it is connected to the left half or it's not connected to the left half. Normally, to kind of pair the two, you have to push the reset buttons at relatively the same time, I don't know, 500 milliseconds apart or something like that maximum. And they do the process of connecting to each other and connecting to the host computer. Here you can see the X right now where it hasn't actually connected to it yet, and now it's updating and now it's connected. So if you ever see an X on this side, you just have to make sure that you probably just reset the peripheral side will be enough to connect, because this is probably still advertising for a connection. If that doesn't work, reset both of them and they should connect up fine. Obviously the battery gauge tells you how much battery is left in the battery in the case. Still haven't really done battery life tests. I have some field testers right now where there might be something on the right side that is draining a little quicker than it should be. I thought maybe logging was still enabled, but that's not the case, so we're still looking into that. But you should get much longer life out of the peripheral or right side than the left side, because the left side does all the heavy work of taking the keystrokes from the right side and sending it and its own keystrokes to the computer. So at any rate, I test now to make sure that the battery charging works. So this the yellow LED is battery charging. When you see that, another firmware bug that we're working on is have the battery status update immediately when plugged in. Right now it doesn't do so. If I reset right now and it reloads, you'll see that the battery symbol will actually change and indicate that it's being charged. That should happen automatically on the fly, and that's not happening yet with the software. It doesn't mean the battery's not charging, it's just the screen isn't displaying the fact that it's charging. But if you've got a cable plugged in and this light is glowing, you know it's charging anyways. That's just kind of a visual feature. So that's still something that'll get released in the near future. So this, I can tell, is charging. The MCU knows that it's charging, and this is also connected. So this USB connected to the peripheral side does not talk to the computer in terms of sending keystrokes. It's still sending keystrokes to the left side wirelessly and then sending them to the computer. This purely on this side is either used for debugging or charging. That's all the USB does on the peripheral side. So I know this side's working. And again, when I unplug that, this icon should go back to the normal battery icon, and it's not. It takes a refresh to do that. So that's something that's still, and it's not the firmware specifically. It's just the notifications. How the notifications get on the screen has to be updated in ZMK yet. So, or sorry, ZMK, depends where you are in the world. So that's the reason for that. On this side, it's a little bit different. in that the USB actually does connect to the computer. So, and again, these icons need to be updating, but if I refresh, you'll see that both the Bluetooth and the battery icon change. The battery icon obviously indicates that the thing is charging, and the other one indicates that you're now communicating with the computer over USB. So again, visual indicators. If you didn't have a screen, it would be hard to figure out that what's going on with your Bluetooth keyboard. So these are just nice to have things, and obviously the layer status here allows you to change layers, and it updates. The momentary update, meaning if you have to hold, say, your raise or lower key and press a combo to have an action done on a different layer, it's actually pretty slow, and you'll be done that key press before this even switches to tell you what layer it's on, and that's just an e-ink thing. The e-paper screens that we're using are just slow to refresh. We updated the firmware so that the actions of the computer do not have to wait for the screen to refresh, which means you can continue typing and stuff, and you don't have to worry about the fact that your layer doesn't show the correct layer there at the time. Before that, you literally couldn't type until this e-ink screen had refreshed and then gone back to the layer or whatever. You had to wait for that. Now we put it on a separate channel or thread type thing on the MCU and in the firmware, so that no longer is the case. Now, if you have a layer changes which are not momentary, meaning you change the layer and it stays changed, then this layer will change and it'll display, let's say, Colmac or whatever layer, or media or whatever. That'll work fine. It's just don't rely on this display to say, oh, I'm on this layer, let me do this, when you're using momentary, because it's so slow that you'll have moved on already by the time that changes. So at any rate, I know now that this thing is fully functional. I know they're connecting, I know it's charging, I know it's able to communicate with the computer. So that's good. So now what I do is I just give her a refresh, get my handy dandy pliers, and leave it on a white screen. I don't know if burn-in is really a thing with e-ink, but I'm leaving it at white screens for transportation. So yeah, that's the end of that. I guess I'll add a last part. I'll probably cut this part out and use it for a separate video, but to install your switches. For anyone who's done this before, you know that the sockets, if not supported from the bottom, have a tendency to possibly tear out of the PCB. So the tolerances between the back of the case and the socket is close enough that what I recommend when putting a switch in is putting your finger right behind and kind of pinching between the case and the back plate. When you put your switch in, putting pressure on that bottom plate will actually support the socket, so that you don't have to worry about the socket tearing out of the PCB. It's never happened to me, but I've seen it happen to other people, and I don't know if it was just a poor quality PCB, or if that there's actually a huge problem with this. But you're better off just supporting behind the switch that you're pushing in, and it should engage nicely there's a recess on either side, so the thickness of the case where it snaps in is the thickness recommended by Kale to clip in, so it is actually held in really well. In fact, I found removing switches to be kind of a pain, and I had to remove the back plate and push the pins from the switch out from the back. Was kind of a foolproof and faster way to do it than trying to, because you don't want to scratch the anodization. You kind of want to make sure that you kind of keep the upside surface looking great. So that's what I would recommend. In terms of flashing, yeah, it's a no-brainer really with ZMK. It's got the bootloader that's on the module is a UF2 bootloader, which means it's basically USB. You plug in your USB cable, press the reset switch twice to reset, and it goes into bootloader mode. You'll know it's in bootloader mode when the blue light is doing a slow, what I call heartbeat or pulse. You won't notice anything on the screen, and maybe that's something that we can build in the future, but what you will notice is that the user LED is flashing at a slow pulse rate. And you'll hear your computer kind of make a chime as well, because what happens on at least the Windows machine that I'm working on, a window pops up and it's basically a USB drive. You take your new firmware, drag and drop onto the window that popped up. It'll upload it to the MCU and then disconnect out of bootloader mode, and your new firmware will be active. Literally, if you have the files on your desktop, it takes 20 seconds to update your firmware. It's really quite easy. So yeah, that's all there's to that. I'm sure there's stuff that I've left out and that this video is way too long already, but I thought I'd just kind of give you guys a heads up on what I'm up to and what my days look like. Constantly, I'm here all the time doing this, but it's worth it because I'm really excited to see you guys get these in your hands. So yeah, signing off. Have a good one.